Thank you. And, I'd remind the graduates, the last time I spoke to them was during their investiture. I guess it was probably 20 months ago, 18 months ago. And for those of you who were with us at that event, I had them all stand up and take an oath that they would use their degrees to make this region the light of California. And how times have changed from that moment to today in the world. If I had known how needed you'd be in the world, I would have done 3 times as many scholarships. And Anil can hold me to that in the future. Obviously, no one could have imagined what California and America would be like in 2017 post the election and the unrest that would, I think, characterize our civil society and our culture, which is why what you're going to do after your graduation is so important. I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of empathy, because I think it's a word that's bandied often about now in the wake of the election and amidst all of the cultural unrest going on. And I think it's a word that's really often misunderstood. The first thing you need to know about empathy is it always begins with you empathizing with someone else, not you asking others to empathize with your problems. And the biggest problem you're going to face, and that we're all relying on you to address, is the fact that 3 out of 4 families who work couldn't weather a $700 surprise expense. I want you to pause on that for a second. I want you to think about, each of you, in your own lives, the times when your budget has been a little bit stressed. Maybe there were some bills you couldn't pay. Do you remember that uncertainty you felt, that stress, kind of looking over your shoulder, that sense of upset in your stomach? Now, imagine living with that sense of stress every single hour of every single day. That's life in America for 3 out of 4 working families. That's not life for homeless people or the lowest income of those among us. That's life for 3 out of 4 people. And so, as you enter the public policy world and you hear in our culture the word empathy bandied about, remember that empathy has to start with a necessity of addressing what really afflicts the other. And there's no bigger problem than the fact that most people are living in this constant state of stress and anxiety. And we know so much more today than we ever have known about what this does to the human condition. We have no excuse. We know that when kids grow up in poverty, it literally affects their brain development. That this question that 3 out of 4 people are living in this constant state of financial stress, and what do we do about it, literally strikes at the central question of what kind of society do we want? We talk a lot about freedom as a society, but I'd ask you this: if you're a person who literally couldn't weather a $700 surprise expense, which means you're a broken wrist, a couple of blown tires, a busted pipe away from financial crisis, what kind of freedom do you actually have? Do you have freedom too? If you don't have any flexibility to spend time with your kids or have the peace of mind to know you can manage a healthcare crisis? So, graduates, this is the challenge that we're expecting you to solve. Nothing more, nothing less. And I need you to know this uncomfortable truth. There is not any angel coming from the beyond to fix this for us. We have to fix this ourselves. You have to fix this. And the work you're going to do in the inland region is especially critical to our state. My grandfather, who came here about 65 years ago, moved to Orange County when he came to California, because at that time, that's where new Californians went. That's where there were jobs and affordable housing. But new Californians today come to the inland region and to Riverside and San Bernardino. And so what happens in this region has consequences more than just about the borders of these two counties. It's a really fundamental question about whether the California dream that's been a light for generations of families still exists for this generation of new Californians. The good news is we have leaders who are setting examples for our graduates. And there are things that are moving on the front of economic justice in California. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight something huge that's happened just this past week in California. At a moment in our country's history where programs that support working families are under assault at the federal and the state level, California is a light in the darkness for having substantially expanded something called the Earned Income Tax Credit. And there's an individual here who deserves a special recognition for his leadership in expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit, and that's Senator Richard Roth. And I actually want him to have a round of applause. He deserves it. I want you to really understand what the Earned Income Tax Credit means for working families and why it's a light for what we can do to make these two counties work, and an example, I hope, for the kinds of achievements that I expect of our graduates. So the Earned Income Tax Credit is literally a cash back credit you get when you work. You have to work to get it. But as we all know, the biggest problem isn't that people don't have jobs, it's that they have 3 jobs and they still can't get ahead. And so the central challenge is, how do we make work pay better for those who are working full-time and more than full-time? California launched an Earned Income Tax Credit last year, but it had a big bug in it, which is it didn't count self-reported income. Now, self-reported income is the kind of income you earn when you keep a house, garden, drive for a ride-sharing company. It's the fastest growing kind of income in California. In fact, all income growth in California in the last 15 years has come from self-reported income. It's disproportionately earned by women and people of color. And until a couple of days ago, it was not included in the Earned Income Tax Credit. So over the last, really, 14 months, more than a year, Senator Roth has been a champion for expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit to honor the work done by those who report self-reported income. And this week, it was announced that that hard work has paid off, that California is expanding the Earned Income Tax Credit to extend it to another 1.1 million families. Now, 1.7 million families in total starting next year will have their work pay better because of the leadership of Senator Roth and because of the grassroots energy that frankly started in the inland region. The expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit has a specific root in San Bernardino and Riverside counties, because one of the ways that we advocated for its expansion was activating the voices of low-income families themselves, in particular those who live in Riverside and San Bernardino. I mention this because I hope it's an example that amidst a time when I think we wonder, can we really advance the interests of working families? The resounding answer is heck yes. And the leadership example is coming from this region. It matters because it's an example of what I expect from you. I expect real results. I expect real imagination. I don't expect to hear, we can't fix any of these things, because the stakes are too high, and the investment that we've made in you is with the expectations that you are going to fix things. But we have to continue to do our part to help these graduates, which is why today I want to make a special announcement to them. I'm launching a program that will begin in Riverside and San Bernardino that will be called Field Offices for Economic Security, because I think the central challenge of our time is providing security for everyone who works. And the first field office for economic security that we're going to be opening is right here in the inland region. And any graduate of this class has a guaranteed full-time job with full benefits in this field office. But wait, there's more. We've educated these people to think originally, not to follow our agenda, which is why the way that these field offices are going to work is as follows. Each field captain for economic security will get a full-time salary, full benefits, office space, and the empowerment to do whatever they think they need to do in their community to advance economic security. So there'll be resources and funds that you do to set your own agenda, to come up with your own ideas. Because the inconvenient truth is we don't have the answers for fixing this. And one of the things you need to now know as you go out into the world postgraduate, that you're going to have to figure out the answers. The difference between after school and in school is in school you have the advantage of rubric, right? Lesson plan, reading list, etc. But the reality is in life there's no reading list. And there's no schedule of answers. And there's no tests with multiple choices that have a right answer, which is why the way we're structuring this is to give you full-time salary, full benefits, and a blank piece of paper that says deliver economic security to the families who work hard in Riverside and San Bernardino and deserve more. So with that, I want to introduce our next speaker, Congressman Mark Takano, who is also an important champion for this region, a fellow Harvard College graduate. I think I might be a couple of years younger, but he's a couple of years wiser. And someone who always has the interests of this region top of mind. He's been a trustee for the Riverside Community College District, a member of Congress since 2012, and I want to tell you a brief story that I think doesn't get enough attention about the congressman. You remember in 2013 when there was a terrible government shutdown budget mess in DC? There were some funds that were really necessary for the Metrolink Paris Valley extension here in the inland region. And literally, in the nick of time, Congressman made sure that these funds were secured before the government shut down. And that's the kind of presence of mind that is the profile of courage that we need from our representatives in Washington, D.C. And so it's a privilege to introduce him to address you next. Thank you.